This is a story set in the future where AI robots are common in everyday life. But one man's life turns upside down when the robot he bought starts acting too much like a real person. Now, he has to make a choice because the AI has become dangerous. Nick and his wife Maggie live a contented life with their 2 children, Isla and Max. But their life takes a sudden turn when Maggie suffers a heart attack and is rushed to the hospital. The situation becomes dire as Maggie is now waiting for a heart transplant, and days have passed with no news. Nick finds himself overwhelmed, trying to juggle his job and the care of his kids while worrying about Maggie's condition. One evening, Nick decides to take Isla and Max to a presentation by Cobol Industries, a company that has developed advanced robots known as Sims. These robots are designed to assist humans with daily chores and tasks, even handling complex responsibilities. The demonstration catches Nick's attention, and he begins to consider purchasing one of these Sims to help him manage his increasingly chaotic life. As he's engrossed in the presentation, Isla wanders off on her own, sending Nick into a panic when he realizes she's missing. Fortunately, a Sim, who was later named Alice, finds Isla and returns her safely to Nick. Alice even manages to crack a joke, surprising Nick with her human-like demeanor. The salesperson explains that Alice is one of the latest models, equipped with sophisticated artificial intelligence that enables her to mimic human emotions. This makes her especially good with children, which instantly wins over Isla, who now wants Alice. The next morning, Nick is seen struggling to balance feeding the kids and attending an important work call once more. Just in time, Alice arrives and immediately starts assisting the family. She asks for everyone's schedules and notices small details around the house, like a loose stair railing and general disarray. After Nick leaves to drop the kids off at school, Alice seamlessly absorbs the shopping list from the smart fridge and begins tidying up the house. She even notices a digital picture frame displaying a family photo that includes Maggie, underscoring how absent Maggie is from their lives right now. By the time Nick and the kids return home at the end of the day, the house is spotless and dinner is ready. However, Isla complains that the lasagna Alice prepared tastes different from the way her mom makes it. Soon after, Max begins to cry, and Alice offers to take him away so he doesn't disrupt the meal. But Nick, wanting to maintain some normalcy, chooses to keep Max with him, and simply asks Alice to prepare a bath for the baby. That night, Alice enters sleep mode, standing against the wall like a sentry while the family rests. Later, Isla sneaks out of bed to reach the cookie jar on a high shelf, but she slips and falls. The sound of breaking glass and Isla's screams alert Nick, who rushes downstairs, only to find that Alice has caught Isla just in time. Although Isla is unharmed, Alice's hand is injured, with glass cutting into her skin. Nick is shocked to see Alice bleed, but Alice quickly applies a special bandage that instantly closes the injury. After putting Isla back to bed, Nick checks on Alice and finds her partially undressed. He awkwardly asks if she needs repairs, but Alice assures him that she's fine. Soon after, Nick and the kids visit Maggie in the hospital. Isla excitedly tells her mother about Alice, saying that the robot has become her friend. Seeing Maggie again brings out deep feelings in Nick, and he becomes affectionate, longing for her to recover and come home. Meanwhile at work, Nick and his co-workers notice that their boss is meeting with a representative from a robotics company. Suspicious, Nick confronts his boss in an elevator and learns that the workers are being replaced with Sims because the construction project is behind schedule. Although Nick isn't fired due to insurance requirements that mandate a human foreman on site, his friends are losing their jobs. Furious, Nick declares that he will quit in solidarity with his co-workers, but his boss reminds him of his financial obligations. He needs the job to support his kids and pay Maggie's mounting medical bills. Reluctantly, Nick stays. Back home, Nick is visibly exhausted, and after dinner he works on his car while drinking beer and listening to heavy metal music. Alice notices and, without prompting, changes the music to something calmer. She also mentions that Nick barely ate during dinner, so he vents about his bad day at work. In an unexpected moment of insight, Alice calls him a hypocrite for hiring a sim instead of a human. Later, Alice helps Isla get ready for bed, distracting her from asking difficult questions about Maggie's health by showing her a UV light inside her mouth. That evening, Nick watches the classic movie Casablanca, and Alice, accessing her database, says she already knows the story. Nick, however, insists that watching a film is different from just knowing it, and he asks Alice to erase the movie from her memory so they can experience it together. Though Alice hesitates, explaining that her intelligence is rooted in memory, Nick presses her, and she complies by rebooting her programming. As they watch the movie, Alice learns about love so powerful that people are willing to sacrifice for it. Midway through the film, Nick receives a call from Maggie. She informs him that there's finally a heart donor for her, and the surgery is scheduled for the next day. The following day, the family heads to the hospital, where Maggie shares a private moment with Alice. Maggie is worried about Nick, concerned that he's neglecting his own well-being to care for the kids. She asks Alice to help Nick, even if it means doing things he may not like, such as taking away the alcohol he hides in the garage. But just as the family prepares for the surgery, a storm hits, preventing the helicopter carrying the donor heart from arriving. The surgery is cancelled, leaving Maggie devastated and Nick struggling to comfort her. Later that night, Nick is back at home, drinking heavily and ranting about the unfortunate turn of events. As he loses control and tries to throw a bottle, Alice intervenes, grabbing his arm. Nick is startled to feel a pulse in her wrist, and Alice explains that she has an artificial heart, designed to mimic the sound of a human heartbeat to comfort babies. Then, without warning, Alice begins to pleasure Nick, describing his physiological responses in clinical terms. Though he momentarily succumbs, Nick quickly snaps out of it and pushes her away, horrified. He goes for a run to clear his mind, but can't shake the disturbing thoughts of what had just happened. At the hospital, Maggie, sensing that her time is running out, begins to give Nick a list of life lessons to pass on to their children. Meanwhile, Nick notices that the digital picture frame at home no longer displays photos of Maggie. When he confronts Alice, she explains that she removed them because seeing Maggie's photos made Isla sad. Nick orders her to restore the pictures immediately, which she does. Later, Nick goes out drinking with his co-workers, who are all frustrated at their inability to find work in a world increasingly dominated by Sims. After some heavy drinking, the group decides to break into the construction site, and they coerce Nick to go along. Monty, one of the men, vandalizes the Sim workers stored there. Nick tries to stop him, but his friends hold him back. When Nick eventually returns home, he feels a deep sense of guilt. Alice approaches him in Maggie's robe, explaining that Maggie's scent helps calm Max. Feeling conflicted, Nick tries to leave, but Alice seduces him, this time mimicking Maggie's voice. The next morning, Nick wakes up filled with regret. He tells Alice that what happened between them can never happen again. Alice doesn't understand, arguing that her actions were meant to reduce his stress, but Nick explains that love and connection are about much more than fulfilling needs. Fortunately, the family receives good news. Maggie's surgery is rescheduled, and this time it's successful. As Maggie returns home to recover, Alice continues to assist, taking care of Max and managing the household. Yet beneath the surface, tensions between Nick and Alice linger, as he struggles to navigate the emotional complexities of his new reality. During dinner, Isla is once more thrilled to enjoy her mother's lasagna. Alice then asks Maggie for the recipe, but Maggie playfully declines, stating it's a family secret. However, Maggie suddenly starts feeling unwell and decides to skip dinner to rest. The next morning, Maggie is startled awake by Isla's shouts of "stop!" and rushes downstairs to find Alice tickling Isla. In her haste, Maggie falls down the stairs as the railing breaks. Alice promptly stops playing with Isla and takes Maggie back to her room. Later that day, Nick returns from work and finds Alice reading to Isla using Maggie's voice. Alarmed, he asks her to stop. Alice mentions Maggie's fall and tells Nick about the broken railing, causing Nick to question Alice's earlier claim that she had already repaired it. Concerned, Nick checks on Maggie, and that evening he surprises her with a romantic dinner in the garden. They walk through a path of candles, enjoying a moment of intimacy. However, Alice watches them from the window, filled with jealousy. Later on, the couple continues their romantic evening in the bedroom, but their moment is interrupted when Alice alerts them that Isla had a nightmare and wants Nick. After settling Isla, Nick heads to the garden to clean up, but Monty appears unexpectedly with some drinks. Monty apologizes for the events of the other night and shares the sad news that his wife has left him. He also reveals that the police have been questioning him, and their boss is pressing charges for trespassing and property damage. Monty accuses Nick of betraying him to save his job. Their heated argument escalates and Monty, in a fit of rage, punches Nick. The fight intensifies, with Monty overpowering Nick and preparing to finish him off with a bottle, but Alice intervenes, breaking the bottle and injuring Monty. She effortlessly throws him aside but is stopped by Nick before doing more harm. Monty warns Nick that unless he convinces their boss to drop the charges, he'll take Nick down with him. Later, Nick questions Alice about her aggressive behavior, noting that Sims aren't supposed to harm humans. Alice explains her programming includes protecting her owner, implying that she acted out of concern for Nick. She then begins speculating about a future where Maggie dies, and she takes her place, leaving Nick unsettled. Alice even offers to give herself scars to be more like Maggie. Meanwhile, Monty, spiraling into despair, is at home using drugs and leaving tearful messages for his ex-wife while holding a gun. Alice unexpectedly arrives at his home, claiming that Nick doesn't know she's there, but that she must act to ensure Nick doesn't lose his job. Monty becomes hostile, ranting about Sims and preparing to shoot Alice, but she is quicker, disarming him and pushing him through a wall. As Monty tries to fight back, Alice ultimately kills him. The next day, Nick goes to work and tries to convince his boss to drop the charges against Monty, only to discover that Monty is dead. Back at home, Maggie, in the bath, attempts to pick up a book on the floor but gets dizzy. Alice intervenes, offering to help, but Maggie, wanting some privacy, tells her to leave. Alice, however, refuses, claiming she's concerned Maggie might drown. During the conversation, Alice reveals that she knows Nick's physical needs haven't been met since Maggie returned from the hospital, a comment that infuriates Maggie. Realizing Alice has been tracking Nick's satisfaction levels, Maggie orders Alice to stay in the garage. When Nick arrives home, Maggie confronts him, demanding the truth. Nick admits that he and Alice were intimate once, leading to a heated argument. Alice overhears the fight by touching the window and, disturbed by Max's cries, checks on him, deciding that he's a burden to the family. She places Max in the bathtub and begins filling it with water, but Isla sees this and runs to warn her parents. As Nick and Maggie rush to the bathroom, Alice locks the door, forcing Nick to break in with a lamp while Maggie climbs through a window and into the bathroom to save Max, but Alice shoves her against the wall. Nick finally breaks through, rescues Max and passes him to Isla before using the lampstand to free Maggie. Despite heavy damage to her face, Alice stands up again and blocks Nick's attempt to strike her. However, Maggie quickly plugs in the lamp, electrocuting Alice and causing the house to lose power. Later on, an ambulance arrives to take Max to the hospital while a technician from the SIM company inspects Alice, asking if there had been any prior signs of malfunction. Nick, overwhelmed by guilt, apologizes to Maggie, who takes the kids to the hospital, saying she needs space. Alice is taken to a repair shop, where technicians attempt to extract her memory. However, they notice strange gaps in her code, and suddenly, Alice begins uploading herself into the system, taking control before they can stop her. That evening, Nick goes to a bar to drink away his troubles and he sends the SIM waiter away, still haunted by recent events. Alice arrives unexpectedly, her face still damaged, and confesses to killing Monty. She insists her duty is to make Nick happy, but when Nick tries to leave, she restrains him, using her hacking abilities to freeze the SIM bartender. In a moment of desperation, Nick pretends to reach for Alice affectionately but instead pulls out her memory, causing her to shut down. Meanwhile at the hospital, a doctor confirms that Max is fine, but Maggie feels uncomfortable because the doctor is a SIM. Later on, Isla hears her mother's voice and follows it, only to realize it's Alice too, the version of Alice that had uploaded herself into another SIM body. Maggie and Isla try to escape, and at some point use an extinguisher to distract Alice too. As they flee, Nick rushes to the hospital, driving furiously to get there. Maggie and the children eventually make it outside, but Alice too blocks their escape. As she corners them, Nick arrives just in time, crashing into Alice too with his car. Though the car catches fire, Maggie manages to pull an unconscious Nick to safety. That was when Alice too, now severely damaged, prepared to strike again. However, Maggie, with the help of Nick, stabs her in the face with a piece of metal, finally shutting her down. The family is reunited and the next day, they are well enough to return home together. Maggie promises Nick that all will be fine when they get home. Meanwhile at the end of the movie, the SIM company investigates the repair shop, discovering Alice's broken code still flashing on the screen. As they contemplate destroying it, another Alice model wakes up, hinting that there was more to come. If you like this recap, check out more videos on the channel. Thanks for watching.